the Color My World class coming up in January. I'm just starting right now with a picture of everything that we have right by our workstation. So these are the tools of the trade that will be handy for you to have during the class. If you look carefully, we need you to have Small House 1 and 2 photocopied with that exact 1-inch scale. This must be exact on all of your photocopying, otherwise your houses will not go together. Then we have cut out our fabrics for our Small House 1, and they are all labeled so that you don't get confused about what goes where. This handy little tool right here is just a postcard, a place card. You need one of those as well. A small iron and a wool mat are handy to have, not necessary, but handy to have.
So we're going to start paper piecing the bottom part of house number 1. I'd like you to do all your 8 number 1 houses first, then your number 2 houses, then you won't get them mixed up. So because we're paper piecing, we start with number 1, and number 1 is an A. So we find that piece and we're going to put it on our piece of paper, and you can either glue it or pin it. I'm a pinner, so I'm going to pin that on. And then I'm going to fold that back, use my add a quarter, add an eighth, I think is what I have. I think it's add an eighth. And we'll add number 2 to that, which is your door. Then I'm going to take it to the sewing machine, and my stitching length is at 1.5. And I'm going to stitch on that line just like you're supposed to when you're paper piecing. And I've got a 70 needle in my sewing machine. Just start ahead of that line a bit. Doesn't have to be much, just a stitch or 2. And I'm going to sew right on that line. So it's right on that line, and then I will press it. And pressing is important. You want that seam to be completely flat. And I also will use the Precision Piecing starch pen, and that helps to make that lie flat, and it does. You don't want any creases in your piecing. You want it completely flat. Then I'm going to continue on. I've done 1 and 2. Now I'm going to fold this back towards me. You always work to your left, to your right side. Cut my add a eighth, and then I will add my B color, which is the other side of your house color, and I lay that along that cut edge because I know that's given me my seam allowance, and then we'll sew along that line. And start just ahead of that line again. And then sew on the line. And then I will press it again. So that I know it's completely flat without any bumps or lumps. And I want my fabric to be past this solid line. That's your sewing line. So you want it 1/4 of an inch past. Before we go any further, in your pattern, it tells you what size to cut each piece, and it labels them. So house 1, it says, and it tells you to cut 2, and those are the amounts, and you label that A and B. So ignore the coffee stains. I have made a couple of them, or one of them bigger. So C is 1.5 by 3.25. And on house 2, which you haven't got to yet, there's one, C again is 1.5 by 1.75. I would like you to make one of them, and if you're finding it too difficult to maneuver the sizes they've given you, just increase them. So I have my bottom piece finished, and the dotted line is the sewing line. So I measured 1/4 past that and trimmed it. So that piece is all trimmed. The piece at the bottom you will have to do by hand with scissors because there is a curve to it. Then I've started my roof section. So I have the windows and the door and the roof on. And now I'm going to put the background on. And we'll put J on first because it's number 7 before 8. And there's an angle to this. You'll always put right sides together on when you're paper piecing, except your very first piece. And it is the right side will be facing your table. And all the other pieces will be right side against it. So I've trimmed that piece off. Now I'm going to lay my piece underneath. And to be sure it is laying correctly, if it isn't covering this piece that I have folded back, then I have to move it, and it isn't. It's not covering at the top. So I will move it down till it covers the top. And it will cover the bottom because it's right there. And when it's folded back, it's big enough on this side as well. So that's how you can tell if, when you're doing an angle, that it's going to be big enough to cover the piece you're trying to make.
So here, ladies, don't try to scrimp on fabric, because the trim off of what you're going to create from this, you will use later on in the quilt. So do not scrimp on your fabric, because inevitably you will not have enough to cover, and then you have to take it out.
And I did say to slide it back, but this is the piece here that you need. You're not needing this extra piece here. So if you do want to move it up a bit, you can, because you can see it is only going to here. But yes, don't try and cut too small. And this is the measurement the pattern gave. So it will work. So I will sew that on. And I've started just beyond that line. And you can sew right through the pattern. It isn't going to matter. And you'll have a piece to cut off, but again, you'll be able to use it in another spot in your pattern. So that's pressed nice and flat. And then I lay my fancy tool on that line, fold it back. Again, I'm working with my right side is nothing's happening on the left side. So make sure there's nothing under here but these pieces that you'll trim off. And I can tell that this piece worked because it's covered. Now I put the J piece on here. When I fold it back, I can see that it's gonna cover at the bottom, at the top, at the side, the whole piece. So now I can sew that piece on. So I have finished the roof piece and I have trimmed it, so 1/4 inch on either side of the dotted, we'll say, line. And the top, you'll have to cut it by hand as well with scissors because it's not straight. It's got a bit of a curve to it. Now I want to attach my door piece with my one with the windows. And I just attach pins. I go through the corner on this side to the corner of that side and on both sides. And then I know that they are in the place they should be for when I sew. Now, if you want to put clips in to hold it while you sew, you go ahead. So I'm going to sew this, but when you get the one house finished, collect your fabrics for your other 8 and put a clip once you get all your walls, your doors, your roof together that you want to use. Clip them together and assemble, gather your 8 fabrics for 8 houses. And then you can just sit and sew when you get ready to do your paper piecing. So I'll put this together and show you what it will look like. And so now you've got one house finished. And
Press it down, right?
you'll press, yeah, I've pressed so all the paper is going down. And I'm going to leave the paper in. It doesn't have to come out. I'm going to just leave all of this looking just like that in a pile, labeled house 1, and you will have 8 house ones clipped together after your month. Please don't work ahead. We want to work each month at the same time. So that should be it for January.